Exclusive, the model caught in an international sex and death scandal. Terry Broome was an American model in the fashion mecca of Milan. Italian playboy seduced her with champagne, cocaine, and whispered promises of fame and fortune. When one tried to make her the centerpiece in his private playpen of sex and drugs, she pulled the trigger. Now free at last from an Italian jail in charges of murder, she tells why. For the first time on American television, Smile, You're Dead, tomorrow on Hard Copy. And that's it for tonight. Good night.
Good night. Next on Hard Copy, Exclusive, the fashion model who murdered her Playboy lover to escape a prison of sex and drugs. Tonight on Hard Copy. Terry Broome was an American model in the fashion mecca of Milan.
It was the worst nightmare. I've never had a nightmare so bad.
Italian playboy seduced her with champagne, cocaine, and whispered promises.
It was hard to believe that someone would use a person as though they were an animal, like a slavery type of market.
But when one tried to make her the prize of his playpen of sex and drugs, she pulled the trigger.
He wanted to have sex, and that was just the way it was going to be.
Now, free at last from a murder sentence in an Italian jail, she tells why.
I felt stronger with the gun. I felt as though it was just my strong point. For me, it was like the equalizer.
For the first time on American television, Smile, You're Dead.
This is Hard Copy for Thursday, May 7th, 1992.
Hello and welcome. I'm Perry Noble.
And I'm Terry Murphy. Good evening.
She was at the center of the fashion world scandal of the decade. Terry Broome, a beautiful model who wound up in an Italian prison for shooting her Playboy lover dead. Now, for the first time, she's talking about the cycle of drugs and sex that led to death. Doug Bruckner reports.
Terry Broome flashed onto the New York modeling scene at age 19 after being discovered at a cocktail party. She was spotted by one of the industry's powers, the owner of the Elite agency.
I met John Casablancas, who is the head of an agency, a modeling agency in New York, and he asked me to go to New York to model. And I had met him, and there was another photographer, a very famous photographer, sitting at the table, and we were just talking, and he just came out like this. It sounded like a great line.
Terry Broome had the break of a lifetime, and she blew it. Signed by the prestigious Ford agency, she ended up spending more time on Manhattan's nightclub circuit than she did at calls and auditions. She stumbled off modeling's fast track, and when the young beauty fell, she fell hard into a sinkhole of drugs, drink, kinky sex, and finally, violent death. It was while attempting a modeling comeback in Europe that she shot the Milan Playboy, a crime which kept her confined 8 years in the Italian prison system. Freed just 2 months ago, she came back to New York to give us this exclusive interview. She talked about her crime and the day in prison when she finally faced up to what she'd done.
That's when I tried suicide, because I thought that I was going to spend the rest of my days in a foreign prison for murder. And it was the worst nightmare. I've never had a nightmare so bad.
But Terry Broome got a 14-year sentence because a jury was convinced she did not plan the murder. Today, she compares her case to the plot of the movie Thelma and Louise. Just like in the movie, Terry Broome says she turned violent because she was once a rape victim.
I was hitchhiking. I was 16 years old, and I was hitchhiking, and I was picked up by a man on a motorcycle, and we ended up being in a motorcycle gang, and I was raped by these two motorcycle people. And it's a build-up. I mean, you may not even feel it. You may think, well, I got along fine, but then something may happen, you just click. I mean, that's what happened with me.
If you'd never been raped, would you have taken the gun out of the drawer that night?
I don't think so. I think a lot of women, I see a lot of women, a lot of men, and a lot of women are very, very ignorant about rape. They think it's only sex. It's not sex, it's violence, and it's a terrible, brutal violence.
Terry Broome never would have met the man she shot to death, never would have been caught in the Playboy scene, never would even have visited Milan if she had not tried to break into the modeling big time in New York in the 1970s.
I guess I pretty much act like a kid, just like I was found or something in a circus or something, because New York to me was great, it was new.
It was the era of disco and the famous dance clubs. Terry Broome partied at Xenon and Studio 54 and watched the rich and famous Cher, Catherine Deneuve, Carly Simon, David Brenner. Her idols were the original supermodels, Brooke Shields, Christy Brinkley, Cheryl Tiegs. The Ford agency and Wilhelmina believed Terry Broome had the looks, but Terry did not have the confidence.
I pretty much sabotaged my own career because I just didn't have it. I felt as though I didn't have it. I couldn't make my living on my looks. At that time in 1978, 1979, drugs and alcohol were very fluent in New York and everywhere. Of course, there was a bit of drug use, and that was, just like everyone, I did that.
In fact, Terry Broome had a serious cocaine problem and sometimes guzzled a fifth of hard liquor in a day. She went to Miami to clean up, but even in the Florida sunshine, the siren song of modeling drew her back.
I missed the life, pretty much the fast lane. So I decided to try modeling one last time because I was 26 years old. I thought that maybe just to give it a try. And so I went to Milan.
Terry Broome at 26. She'd been forced to cope with a gang rape, a teenage divorce, and dependencies on alcohol and cocaine. When she arrived in Italy, things were bad. What she didn't know was they were about to get much worse.
The wild sex parties that led to murder. Terry Broome relives the fateful night when we come back.
Fashion model Terry Broome should have reaped all life has to offer. Then, amid a frenzy of drugs and sex, she killed her Playboy lover. Doug Bruckner continues.
Milan, international fashion capital, with the most stylish ladies now and then in 1984, when a young American named Terry Broome walked these streets with hopes high. She dreamed of becoming one of Italy's most famous models, but reality would make her one of Europe's most notorious criminals.
I had a friend and a couple of people who I knew that were modeling in Italy at the time, and they said, "Why don't you come here just for like a vacation, just try the modeling one last time."
Around the famous Milan landmarks, the cathedral, the Galleria, there were men waiting for the American models, and they weren't booking agents.
It's like a meat market. Pretty much, it's a meat market for these people who are waiting around and wanting the girls, new girls, to come in, and they're playboys. Someone who's going to help them out, who's going to help them get jobs, help them get their wardrobe, help them get their pictures taken. They know people, and so pretty much they put themselves in a position where they're needed, especially when a kid's not able to buy a hamburger, that they're buying them all these clothes, and they're taking care of them, making sure that the person's not going to starve.
This dramatization portrays the extravagant Italian playboy lifestyle of the mid-1980s. American models were chauffeured out of Milan to modern mansions and palatial villas. Festivities started in a very civilized way, amidst an atmosphere of restrained elegance. But these richest of men had the crudest of intentions for their American guests. Soon the models were being plied with champagne and cocaine.
It was hard to believe that someone would use a person as though they were an animal. They were just trying to make a life, and they found themselves in, I guess, in a certain way, like a slavery type of market.
According to Terry Broome, the chains of the Italian playboy's slavery were forged with cocaine. Terry Broome soon found herself using more and more of the white powder.
They used drugs also to get them hooked on the drugs, which made them always much more needed, because they'd get someone, they'd make a drug addict out of this person, and of course, any drug addict, they need their fix, and they would keep going back to this person.
Terry Broome kept going back to the drug parties attended by playboys like jeweler Giorgio Rotti and Francesco D'Alessio, the man she would end up killing.
He became, as they say, my private stalker. Everywhere I'd go, if I got up to move somewhere, he would follow me.
At one of the wild drug and sex parties, with many beautiful models to choose from, Francesco D'Alessio ignored everyone to pursue Terry. When he demanded she go to the bedroom with him, she refused. And D'Alessio wasn't used to being rejected. He was from one of Milan's richest families and had been married to another American model. Terry feared he wouldn't take no for an answer.
I was very, very confused about what to do. I knew that somehow I had to confront Francesco. I had to stop what was going to happen. I know it would have happened. I know that I would have been raped, and that's just the bottom line of it.
It was years before anyone would hear of Thelma and Louise, but Terry says she was living out a real-life self-defense drama in the streets of Milan. She'd once been one of New York's most promising models, but now she'd given up all efforts at a career to party full-time with the Playboy crowd. She'd been binging on cocaine for 2 days without sleep when this photo was taken, just hours before she shot the Playboy dead. When D'Alessio spotted Terry that night in a Milan nightclub, she'd become a stick of dynamite in a miniskirt.
He was standing there, and when I saw him, I said, I want to go, and I was ready to leave. And at that point, he grabs me, and he was threatening me that he had had enough, that he was that he wanted at that time that we were going to have sex, and that was just the way it was going to be.
Drugs fueled her paranoia. At another Playboy's apartment, she did crossword puzzles, flying on cocaine, working herself up to finally call D'Alessio. Could she come over? He must have thought he would finally get his way in the bedroom. What he would get instead is a shot in the chest from Terry's borrowed .38.
I felt stronger with the gun. I felt as though it was just my strong point. Because, I mean, Francesco was a big man. I'm a girl. And so, for me, there was like the equalizer. He called me a bitch, and he said that he knew that I wanted. Actually, he said that he wanted to call some friends so that they could all have a good time. He threw me from the hallway into the bedroom area. He actually threw me across the room, and that's when I started. That's when I decided no more. Wasn't going to put up with that anymore.
Terry Broome ran and got as far as Switzerland before she was arrested. Her trial electrified Milan and revealed that Italians had become disgusted with the antics of the city's rich playboys. There was widespread support for Terry. One newspaper called the victim and his Playboy friends pigs. The victim's ex-wife testified that D'Alessio had beaten her and that his cocaine addiction had turned him into a monster. Terry's own drug binge the night of the shooting was part of her defense. Now, 8 years later, she's a free woman in New York because the Italian jury refused to believe she planned the shooting. Terry says she's over her anger, but she says help is needed for other angry women who may want to copy her and Thelma and Louise.
Because many women out there have been raped, who have not had counseling, who've never gone to the police, who are in the same situation with me, and it's a buildup. I mean, you may not even feel it. You may think, well, I got along fine. But then something may happen, and you just click.
She's got a long road ahead of her rebuilding her life.
She went through that life that I think every mother must fear that their daughter will, the nightmares she'll fall into if she goes off to be a model in some place like Italy around Playboys. Tomorrow on Hard Copy.
I want to be somebody that people remember, and think about, and feel good, and smile.
The little girl who grew up to become the most notorious sex star in America. The Ginger Lynn story tomorrow. Back in a moment with more Hard Copy.
Now, the little girl who grew up to become a sex star. More on her in a moment. She won fame in the sex industry, but once she was a little girl.
When I was a little girl, my grandfather always used to tell me that I had stars in my eyes and that I was going to be somebody. Everything that I looked at had hope. I want to be somebody that people remember, think about, and feel good, and smile. I knew that when I died, I wanted people to remember me.
She grew up to be the most notorious sex star in America. The Ginger Lynn story, tomorrow on Hard Copy. And that's it for tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Terry Murphy.
And I'm Barry Nolan. Hope to see you again next time. Until then, good night. Take care.